The wind crossed the open plains like a living thing, bending the tall grass in slow, whispering waves, carrying with it the scent of dust, sage, and the memory of rain that never quite came. The ranch stood alone against the vastness. Elias Crow had built that place with his own hands after the war took everything else from him, and for years the ranch had been silent company, faithful, uncomplaining, and demanding nothing but work. That evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Elias was repairing a fence post near the edge of his property when he sensed her before he saw her, a presence so still it felt unreal, like the land itself had learned to breathe differently. He straightened slowly, hand resting on the worn wood of the post, eyes narrowing toward the cottonwoods by the creek. She stepped out from the shadows as if she had been carved from them, her dark hair braided and heavy down her back, her dress torn at the hem, dust-streaked, her posture straight despite exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin. She did not approach. She waited. The land waited with her. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but steady, shaped by the wind and something older than fear. She asked if she might stay the night. The words were simple, but the space between them carried weight: history, loss, survival. Elias did not answer right away. He had learned what hesitation could cost. And yet something in her eyes stopped him from refusing. They were not pleading. They were watching, measuring, as if she had already crossed. Desert's far worse than rejection. He asked where she came from, and she told him only that the trail behind her was no longer safe. The rancher glanced toward the fading light, calculating distance, risk, and the rules he had lived by for years. No strangers, no complications, no ghosts invited inside. He told her she could stay until morning, nothing more, and gestured toward the ranch house as though the decision belonged to the earth and not to him, and followed at a careful distance as if aware that trust was something earned one step at a time. Inside, the house smelled of coffee grounds and old wood. The silence was deep, but not empty. Elias lit a lantern and set it on the table. He offered water, then bread. She accepted both without hurry, eating as someone who understood hunger but refused to let it own her. She told him it was Ayanna. He did not ask for the rest. Some names came with stories that were not meant to be taken lightly. The night deepened. Elias showed her the small room near the back, once meant for hands who never stayed. He stopped in the doorway, unsure how to finish the moment. She met his eyes, calm and unafraid, and asked where she should sleep. The question was not flirtation. It was survival. It struck him harder than any accusation could have. He told her the bed was hers, that he would take the chair by the stove. She studied him for a long moment, then said nothing, only closed the door gently behind her. Elias sat by the dying fire, the ranch suddenly unfamiliar, as though the land itself were holding its breath. He wondered who she was running from, what had driven her to cross into a world that rarely welcomed her kind, and why, after years of solitude, the presence of one quiet stranger felt like the beginning of something he could neither name nor control. As the fire burned low, he realized sleep would not come easily, and that by morning, the ranch and perhaps his life would no longer belong to him alone. If you're drawn into stories where silence speaks, louder than words, and a single decision can change everything, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay with us as this journey continues. Into the night, morning arrived without ceremony, a thin gray light slipping through the cracks in the walls as if unsure it was welcome, and Elias woke in the chair by the stove with his neck stiff and his thoughts already tangled, the kind of waking that felt less like rest and more like surrender. The house was quiet, but it was a different quiet than he was used to, layered with awareness, as though another heartbeat had joined the rhythm of the place. He listened for movement from the back room and heard none, which unsettled him more than footsteps would have. For a moment he wondered if Ayanna had slipped away before dawn, leaving only the echo of her presence behind. But then he smelled smoke, not danger, but cooking, and the realization grounded him. She had woken early, moving with the care of someone who knew how easily a man's trust could shatter. When he stepped outside, the sky was pale and wide. The land stretched endlessly as ever, yet altered in some subtle way he could not explain. She stood near the fire pit, warming her hands, her posture relaxed but alert. as if she belonged to the morning rather than being claimed by it. She greeted him without surprise, thanked him again for the shelter, and offered him coffee brewed thin but earnest, the kind made by someone who valued usefulness over comfort. They sat apart, watching the sun lift itself over the plains, and in that shared silence, Elias felt questions pressing at him. He asked her what would happen when the sun climbed higher, and she answered honestly that she did not know, only that moving during daylight was sometimes safer when fear followed closely. He asked who followed her, and she did not name them, but the way her jaw tightened told him it was not a single person, but a world that had learned to hunt those who did not fit inside its rules. She spoke of her people in fragments, of stories whispered instead of written, of songs that mapped the land more accurately than any fence line ever could. And Elias found himself listening the way a thirsty man listens to rain, without interruption, without judgment. He surprised himself by answering truthfully, telling her about the war, about coming back to a place that no longer remembered him. She did not offer sympathy. She offered understanding, which felt heavier and more honest. The day grew warmer, and with it came the distant sound of riders, faint but unmistakable, carried by the wind the way warnings always were. Ayanna heard it too, her body tensing, her gaze turning toward the horizon, and in that moment Elias understood that the night's hospitality had not ended with the sunrise. The land had already drawn its line, and he was standing on it. He told her she could stay longer until the danger passed, and when she asked what it might cost him, he said only that some things were already paid for in advance. The riders never reached the ranch, whether by luck or by the land's quiet protection, and as dusk returned, Elias realized he no longer measured time by hours alone, but by the space between her words, by the way the ranch no longer felt like a refuge from the world but a place where something new was being written. That night, when she asked again where she should sleep, he answered without hesitation, and the certainty in his voice surprised them both. Outside, the stars burned bright and indifferent, and the plains whispered of change, of paths crossing not by accident, but by necessity. If this story of trust forged under open skies and choices made in silence has kept you listening, don't let the journey end. Here, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more powerful stories where one moment can reshape a lifetime.
Subscribe to my channel.